In this video, we're going to be looking at dialing in for drip filter coffee. Dialing in is a term we use for honing the recipe and other variables for a desired outcome, namely, great tasting coffee. Dialing in is as relevant to drip filter coffee styles as it is to espresso because you're working with similar objectives and parameters. Things like brew ratio of the coffee to water, brew method, filtering medium, roast of the beans and grind size, brew time, agitation, temperature. These are some of the variables we can tweak to get what we're looking for. Dialing in is particularly important when you're trying a coffee you've never tasted before. Even with coffees we use often, there are other parameters to consider, as brewing the same coffee over many days in the coffee bar is often a moving target, and we're always adjusting for a possibly better outcome. So some questions I ask myself are, how coarse or fine should I grind it? Will it taste better with a shorter or a longer immersion? Or how many days since it was roasted? These are all things that affect the final cup. With a new coffee, I would start with the same set of parameters I've used in the past. That gives a good reference point, so you aren't just chasing your tail and adjusting too many things at once. Drip filter coffee has a number of different brew methods, from full immersion to percolation style to machine automated. But there are plenty of variables you can play around with. Before I talk about them, one of the tips I would suggest is to keep some of the things consistent so you can tell what makes the difference when you do vary them. That is, using the same beans roasted and ground the same way, with the same brew method using consistent filter shape and material. Using the same brew ratio, that is, grams of coffee to milliliters of water, a good starting point would be SCA's recommendation of 1 to 18, so 1 gram of coffee per 18 milliliters of water. You also want to keep constant the temperature of the water used for the extraction, and the same effort in agitation. Then, taste your coffee and adjust one of the variables to see what impact that makes. For example, I like to start with a ratio of 6 grams of coffee per 100 milliliters of water. So, for a single cup pour over with a Kalita wave filter, I might use 18 grams of coffee and pour 300 mils over it. Even with coffees we use often, the coarseness of the grind size I'm looking for would be like coarse table salt. With the coffees we make for drip filter here, the roast level is fairly light to medium. The roast degree is a good indicator on how you would approach or tweak some of the variables. If it's a light roast, I might grind finer to increase the brew time. If it's a darker roast, I might use slightly less coffee relative to the amount of water. After tasting, I now have a base for comparison. If I feel the brew was a bit under-extracted, I may choose to grind finer, increase the brew water temperature, or even add more aggressive agitation during the brew time. To be honest, it's a big learning game from past experiences rather than hard numbers. There was a time when using a coffee-specific refractometer was newly integrated into people's dialing in systems, and we would get so wrapped up in the numbers that we would neglect the most important part, how the coffee tastes. If you really want to nerd out at home, try experimenting and see how things taste. For instance, if you're looking for more complexity without over-extracting, you could just adjust the grinder, making it slightly finer. Experiment with the above variables, but also with different filter materials. Different types of filter shapes like B60 or Kalita wave, metal filters, conical versus wave versus flat bottom, full immersion or percolation style methods of brewing. Also, water plays a big part. Water filtration types and experimenting with different types of chemical makeups and pH levels. Ultimately, dialing in coffee is about taking the reins on the variables to achieve a desired outcome in taste. It may be the difference between a coffee made by a barista and a coffee machine operator, even at home.